you're wild for including this on best movies. Like, Terminator 3 is trash, man. I don't know if you've watched it again, but it's bad.
Hello and welcome back to the Behind the Screen podcast. Today I'm joined by my film fanatic friend Connor. How you doing, buddy?
I'm great. It's a beautiful day and I'm doing this podcast again.
Yeah, beautiful day to stay inside and watch movies and talk about them. And today we're going to be talking about sequels that came too late and sequels that came just in time. And we're going to go right into it with the sequels that came way too late. And as always, you can listen to the Behind the Screen podcast on Spotify.
Some of these, though, I thought were just like regular sequels, and then I'm just like, oh, damn, this was like 2 decades later. Like,
So the sequels we're talking about today specifically, well, let's just go through them. We got Zoolander 2, we got Anchorman 2, Dumb and Dumber 2. These are sequels that came out that aren't rebooting the franchise or kind of...
Super Troopers 2.
Super Troopers 2. Just films that took so long to come out that people are kind of like scratching their heads going like, Why did Dumb and Dumber 2 need to come out 20 years after the original?
I kind of understand it more for these comedies, though, because people, I think, were actually, there was a small subset of people that were asking for these comedies, especially like Super Troopers 2.
Right.
People were like, oh, we need another film, like this kind of die-hard comedy fan base for these films, because it's like they're kind of a nostalgia thing for a lot of people. And of course they're going to be terrible. Like, they're not going to live up to it. Like, what are you thinking? You're living in a deluded world if you thought these movies are going to be good. But here they are, and they're crap.
I had hope for some of these.
What? Tell me which you had hope for.
Okay, so we won't get to the ones we had hope for, but let's just keep running through this list. So,
no, I want to know. I'm pinning you down to this question.
All right, so Anchorman 2 is on the list of the sequels that came too late. I'm in this very small subsection that I really liked Anchorman 2.
Do you know what they call bats? Bats. Chicken of the cave.
No one calls them chicken of the cave.
Anchorman 2, from what I recall, was kind of the first one of these movies that came out where I was kind of like, okay, they're going to start making these movies no matter what. I'm honestly surprised that they have not done a Step Brothers 2 by now, which is 100% what it will become.
That's
one of these movies.
That's a dumb idea, and you know it is.
It's a Dumb and Dumber 2 idea, technically.
Man, yeah.
We have Independence Day Resurgence that came out 20 years after. The Strangers Pray at Night. Did anyone ask for this?
I skipped that one.
Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, 19 years later.
The only thing I remember from that movie is Shia LaBeouf swinging with CGI monkeys from CGI vines, and that's like burrowed into my skull as just how bad that movie was.
I was thinking that scene where like the ants eat the dude super quick. There's some pretty cool...
That was like within 2 minutes of the Shia LaBeouf swinging from vines, so they packed a lot of great CG into those few minutes.
I'll say it. When I saw this movie in the theaters as a kid, I loved it. I thought that nuke scene was like the coolest thing ever.
That was cool. When he so dumb, but like when he like opens the fridge and he's like and busts himself up, I'm like, terrible.
So my thing was when I was watching that movie, I didn't think it was bad, and it was kind of one of those first shocking things where when I was reading reviews online, I found out that people didn't like it, and I kind of had to like adjust my opinion and rewatch and kind of go,
yeah, no, I was young, so I was like, oh, like that was kind of weird.
It was cool, but yeah.
And then I was like, oh, people hate this.
Yeah.
Oh God, what have they done? Why aliens? Aliens don't belong in an Indiana Jones movie. I thought it was pretty good.
And then, but
you get old enough to look at the original movies, and you kind of get like the themes and the messages they kind of try and get across. And even though the action, remember that in the second one where they go off a mountain and they float down on like
they go over a
raft.
helicopter and a deflated raft, and then they pull it. They're like, we're not sinking, we're falling.
So why is that okay, but the nuke isn't? You know?
I don't think. I don't know, because that was all done practical. Like there was like dummies in a raft falling from the sky.
There was a bit of effort put into it versus CGI monkeys, CGI vines, CGI.
Yeah, like you can just do whatever the hell you want, and that doesn't mean it's a good idea.
We also have Blues Brothers 2000. And on the sheet, I wrote Ask Connor about this. And this is because I know you love the original movie. And here's the kind of person I am. When I love a franchise or a film, I seek out everything. I'm reading, Jurassic Park comics from like the 90s that are terrible.
No, not me. I don't want to push my luck.
You don't want to just absorb all of what that franchise has to offer. You don't want to watch, but you did watch.
I know it existed, and I know what people were saying about it. And I saw your notes and I'm like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to have seen this. And so today I'm like, oh, it's like 3 hours till I have to do this show. I'm going to watch this 2-hour movie instead of relaxing and doing something I actually want to be doing. And guess what? It was abysmal.
Let's get into why it was abysmal, though, because there's a lot of things with the movies we listed just now that carry across through all of them. And one of the reasons is that these actors are way too old to be playing these youthful 20-year prior characters that they came up with.
Hey, want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
Yeah, I think
it's sad sometimes.
It's sad, and it plays like a lot of them are doing caricatures of the original character.
Yeah, it feels like Jim Carrey's doing a Jim Carrey impression and not like, again, lightning in a bottle, some of these original movies that they're making sequels to, like Zoolander, Dumb and Dumber. Like, I cannot believe how they came up with that stuff originally, and I can't believe how they came up with the content for the sequels to those movies.
No, hit the nail on the head there, because I think there's just so much luck involved with these comedies, like a lot of talent too, but I think it's just like when you put this same formula to work with a lot of the same writers, directors, you can't make it happen a second time just because it was so special the first.
And there's probably, for every Step Brothers, there's 100 other, raunchy comedies that came out that just didn't make the cut, Like, I'd love to see a sequel to Extract, No one saw Extract.
I saw Extract.
You saw Extract?
Yeah.
That's because you're Connor and you've seen everything, though.
I love
Extract's
Extract.
a great movie. I
good.
love Mike Judge. Here's another thing. Some of the original actors are dead. John Goodman is in Blues Brothers 2000. Is he so does he replace him, or is it like a twin brother situation?
So he's a bartender at a strip club where one of the old band members, he runs the strip club.
Yeah.
And one night he gets up on stage. Elwood's just like, oh yeah, this is the guy. And he's just like, next time you see him, he's in a Blues Brothers suit. And there's also a kid, like a 10-year-old kid who joins the band. It's not just John Goodman.
Yeah.
It's this little kid who's just like, a delinquent, and the nuns make him look after him, and he's just like this snot-nosed kid that can he's just so uncharismatic, and it's just like, when you got a kid in a film like that.
Well, I was gonna say this a little bit later because we're talking about sequels because the new Bill and Ted movie's coming out, and you and I absolutely love that. We 100% have to watch together August 26th.
I'm so
jazzed.
excited.
I showed you my yearbook thing, my yearbook photo. I have, a quote in there. I'm very excited.
The trailer looks great.
But here's the one thing, though, and it relates to about what you exactly said about that film. So in Bill and Ted, in the trailer, we see that they are going to be having to interact with their daughters.
Yeah.
Now, so many of these movies, surprisingly enough, have these weird, sibling, daughter, son plots.
You're hot for my daughter. What? Am I right? What? Am I right? I
just found out I have a kid, but I don't know how to be a father.
In Indiana Jones, you have Shia LaBeouf coming in. In Star Wars The Phantom Menace, you have Darth Vader as a kid.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time this does work to complicate the plot and kind of overstuff it in a really bad way.
In Tron Legacy, it's about a teenager taking over, Whenever you see these characters' children in these sequel movies, they're always just doing impressions of the main characters in the original movies, and it's just a farce.
Apple didn't fall far from the tree.
Wow, you're really sweet, mister, but I'm waiting for my dad and his friends, so you'll excuse me.
No, it's me, Lloyd.
No, and I think in the Bill and Ted trailer, they packed a lot of Bill and Ted into it and not so much the daughters. And
exactly.
I hope that's how the film actually is, and it's not just they're culling scenes with them in it. Like, I hope the daughters aren't the majority, even though they look like they cast really well.
My whole thing is that I just hate the fake sincerity. There's just way too many moments in these movies where it's like a sequel to a comedy, but then they have to take like a 3-minute scene to have this like heart-to-heart moment, which
I know we haven't been as close as we need to be.
You cannot believe how many of these movies actually do that.
Kids are like our reboots. Another chance to tell a brand new version of the same old story. I know I'm supposed to be teaching Amy stuff, but it's like I'm learning from her every day.
It's really frustrating because it just grinds the film down to a halt, and it was never really about that in the originals.
I want to see a film where they start off super close and they're just hate each other by the end.
That's a great idea for one of these movies, but how about they're estranged and at the end of the day, they make up at the end.
Also, the thing that bugs me about like stuff like Independence Day Resurgence is like the whole premise is, gotta save the world again.
Yep.
Like, I haven't seen that movie and I know what it is.
Yeah. Again, so many of these movies retread so many plot elements from the first movie that you're just watching the exact same thing, or they're trying to top the movie and it's just blowing up something even bigger than before.
In the case of Blues Brothers 2000, I was like cringing because I knew what scene was coming next. They do the exact same thing until about like the last third of the film. The exact same stuff. They're like, we got to get the band back together, and they're going to their workplaces. It was hard to watch, man. I'm like, come on, John Landis.
Yeah.
Like, directed it again, and it's like, you just couldn't come up with anything different.
And we will say that John Belushi was in the original Blues Brothers, but then he couldn't come back for the sequel because obviously he passed away. Same with John Candy and some other actors in these other films. And then you have films like Star Wars that are starting to recreate people in CGI to extend the characters.
There's no resting in peace anymore. They are going to take your digital ghost.
Wakey, wakey!
Like, Tupac is in heaven just being like, I wish they'd let me stop performing. Carrie Fisher, just no peace.
They're going to be doing deep fakes for the next 100 years. It's going to be the worst thing ever.
Yeah, instead of actually just like, let's sit down at a table and write something original.
Yeah. And let's just finish up briefly here. Let's talk about, do we think that these films tarnish the originals in any way? I mean, a lot of people kind of get upset that they're even trying to do something. I will never be against a movie for just merely coming out. Like, I don't care that Anchorman 2 came out or Zoolander 2 came out, because the originals are just as funny. And again, I'm the kind of person that, who knows, maybe the third Zoolander will be funny. I'm all about taking risks, taking chances, but it just seems like a lot of the risks and chances that they've been taking are just the worst.
No, I totally agree with you. I don't think they should stop putting out sequels. I don't think it's a bad idea, because you do get gems. You look at Mad Max Fury Road, look at Blade Runner, look at Clerks 2. Like, these are awesome additions to the franchise, but I mean, 8 times out of 10, you're going to get a dud, and I think it's just because they're trying so hard to please the original audience that there's too much pressure, there's too much expectations, that they just go with a very formulaic film.
Exactly, the safest thing possible. You just touched on a couple of films here, but with Bill and Ted Face the Music coming out so soon, we're going to take a look at some sequels that came back just in time. So we had Mad Max Fury Road, 30 years after the original. And this is one of those sequels where I will put it in the sequel category and not in the reboot category, because it hasn't had a chance to have a franchise built around it. So for the time being, in the year 2020, we only have one Mad Max Fury Road film.
And it follows the events of Thunderdome, right?
Exactly. It follows them fairly loosely, but
it doesn't matter. It's not a reboot. It's a different actor, but that doesn't matter. Like, if they
director.
If they put Mel Gibson in this new film, like, I would have like slapped myself and everybody in the production. But George Miller pulled it off.
100%.
Shot a bunch of stuff in the desert and then just we're gonna VFX everything, and it looked amazing.
We also have films like Dredd 3D, 17 years after the original.
Absolutely love that movie. Another really good use of just updating from the source material. But yeah, again, a lot of these comic book movies have so much source material that it's you can build a world. There's already this big lore around them, so it's you can pull other stuff.
How did Spider-Man get his powers again, though? Was he bit? I don't know.
Let's just do it again. Let's just tell him again.
Ben Parker, no! We have Toy Story 3, which I put this on here. It was a 10-year gap between the two films, and a lot of the sequels we are talking about today are those sequels that when you hear about them, you go, there's no way they're making a sequel to that movie. And when
they love money.
Yeah. Now, we definitely know that there's nothing that
Nothing's
Pixar,
off limits.
Nothing's off limits. But when Toy Story 3 came out, we were that generation. We're the 1994 generation where we grew up with the first two movies, and we were in grade 11 or 12 when this newest one came out. We were the same age as Andy growing up in those movies. And it's kind of one of the cases where the movie itself adapted itself to know who was watching it. Like, it understood that people were watching it from the OG days.
Yeah.
But also, this was going to be some people's first experience into watching these movies.
No, it was a great script, like with what's his name, Andy, going to college, and it's, I don't know, it was like incredibly sad. Like,
we all went to college like the year after that.
I know, I'm not a big animation guy, but like when they're like looking into like the flames of the incinerator, I'm like, wow, you really went all in, and you really made it pay off.
And especially when we're talking about films that came out at the perfect moment after, being a sequel. This was, again, 10 years. We never really expected this film at all. Like, I never thought that they were going to make a third Toy Story, or a fourth Toy Story, or a fifth Toy Story.
I saw that, like, I didn't know Toy Story 4 existed, and then I was, like, on my Cineplex app, and I'm just like, oh, this is out now.
You're like, what is this, a direct-to-video? What is this?
Yeah, like, oh, is that a spork?
A film that we love, Halloween 2018.
Yeah.
It came out 40 years after the original, 16 after the last Halloween Resurrection film came out, and 9 after Rob Zombie's second movie. So even, in the franchises itself, it's still the one movie right now, a direct sequel to the very first Halloween. And it was just an awesome movie.
Yeah, I saw it on Halloween weekend. It was like packed theater. It was the ultimate experience, but then I watched it again on my laptop at home, and guess what? It holds up.
It's just as good.
They I guess it was Danny McBride and David Gordon Green.
Yeah.
And you can tell they just really care about the original movies.
Yeah, they put effort into like having phenomenal long takes, into having like very great use of gore, into comedy, and even, they're going to incorporate teenagers somehow. I didn't think that they were as bad as like some teenagers are in other horror movies. Like this film, there was nothing that made me kind of like cringe or wince when it was said. I was just in it for the whole ride. And even the fact that the sequel is just called Halloween Kills, tight.
Yeah, no, every single like side character, like the little kid that is being babysit, like so good. Like, I don't know, you really care about all these people, even if it's just like an old woman like getting hammered through a window. Like, you're just like, oh my God, that looks so cozy.
And Jamie Lee Curtis is back too. Like, they know that they can bring back some of the original, bring in some new people, and just make it a brand new experience that works as a standalone, but also works perfectly with the original film.
And they were smart enough not to be like, oh, Jamie Lee Curtis is the lead. Like, we're going to see her for an hour and a half on screen. Like, we got doses of her.
The smartest thing they've ever done.
That was enough.
It was so good. Tron Legacy, 28 years after the original. Tight soundtrack. I got it on vinyl. Great movie. Great visuals. With Dredd, it was also one of the only movies worth seeing in 3D at the time.
Yeah. No, I didn't see the original Tron, but I imagine it just like, it makes sense with the material to update it to like better VFX.
Just the best technology, because again, that whole thing was about pushing it as far as possible. Looking back at it now, it's not the greatest thing ever.
No, but nothing's going to hold up, like especially when you build your entire film off CG.
We can't add this to the list now, but eventually Avatar will be on this list. Because it'll be what, about 10, 11 years after the first one came out?
Yeah, well, all four of them, I guess.
Back to back to back to back.
Man, I hope they project them all at once on 4 screens. So
they're going to be studying those movies for like years to come.
Yeah, they're already writing the textbook, I heard.
Let's just breeze through a couple more of these. We've got Terminator 3, which could end up...
You're wild for including this on best movies. Like, Terminator 3 is trash, man.
Take off your clothes.
Patience, honey.
I don't know if you've watched it again, but it's bad.
I have watched it again.
Yo.
And I think it's...
Your clothes.
Talk to the hand.
Now.
Here's the thing. Terminator 2 is such a good movie that there is no way that it was ever going to come close to it. And I think that the third film just enjoyed itself so much. Again, it came out, 12 years after T2, and this was before the whole craze of having a zillion. This is one of those movies, when I heard about it, I went, oh, Terminator 2, that's pretty cool. Who would have thought they were going to make Terminator 3? You know?
No, man, I watched this when I was a kid, and I was like, I know this is bad now.
Talk to the hand.
And then they made the one with Christian Bale, which I actually didn't hate.
Okay, that's enough out of you, okay? Anchorman 2 is a guilty pleasure. Terminator 3 is not guilty pleasure. It is a decent movie.
That doesn't make any sense, Rick.
We have Blade Runner 2049, 35 years after the original.
Honestly, this is the only sequel that we're talking about that's way later that I'm like, it's really heavily in competition with the original for me.
Again, it's one of those movies that people always will compare to the original, and when you're comparing... I see the same way as like Halloween, where it's like you're kind of comparing it to the original, being like, dang, they're both really, really good, but they both do things so differently, yet so similar.
The original Blade Runner basically invented cyberpunk, like a lot of like cyberpunk novels, even like the Gibson novels, like they came after that film. So I don't know, you have to credit it with that and building this world, but 2049 was just so entertaining and like so on the money with like its look and
it's one of those things where it invented that look and genre, but then also had 35 years of other people creatively outputting that it could kind of borrow and take from and build itself up to be an even bigger, greater world.
No, 2049 could have been like super stale feeling because it's so borrowed from and so like paid homage to the original. But no, man, and like Ryan Gosling was perfect in it because it's like his cold stare was just like, oh, he's a robot. Like, it totally works.
Scream 4, 11 years later, Clerks 2, 12 years later, and Jay and Silent Bob reboot, 18 years later. Why are these sequels so standout and memorable compared to the others? Like, why is it that these ones are... I mean, it kind of goes without saying that, like, a lot of these films had so much... from the original creators, like the original directors and writers and even cast were coming back.
Sure, but they also just sat down and wrote a new script.
Yeah.
Like
a new story.
Oh, we're not going to retread the same
beat
5 plot points. Like it's just, which is what The Force Awakens did, like with A New Hope. And it was just like, it's people don't want to see that. And I don't know if people don't know they don't want to see that. It's just like, don't do it.
It is, and again, it's like the studio's kind of like slapping in the face because they're like, oh well, we need to introduce it to a new generation of people, so let's just remake, you know, the film beat for beat. It pains me on the inside when like people are exposed to these films that, you know, you watch the first one, then you watch the original, and you're like, it kind of feels like I watched the same movie twice. Versus like you watch Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, like those do not feel like the same movies, but they're also great to watch back to back.
Yeah, like I really don't care about a nostalgia trip. Like I don't like want the horns to sound when my favorite character comes back. Like I'd rather
he's drinking blue milk. Blue milk. Ah!
I just want a new story that builds on the original. Is that so much to ask?
You don't want to have fan service every 19 seconds in your sequel, sir? I just want to bring up real quick too. A lot of these movies, the sequels are shot on digital and the originals are all shot on film. So even right away when you're comparing the two, there's a drastically different feel.
Yeah.
And especially with the comedies, I think one of the big things about them was that they just didn't have that much film to like ad lib and whatnot.
Yeah.
Versus with the digital age, they can go on for so long and it doesn't matter how much they shoot anymore. And I think that's one of these things that's hindering a lot of these comedies that they make the sequels to, and it just sucks. Even the actors, I mean, even when they bring back some of these old weathered actors, you can tell that they shot all their scenes in like half a day, and they're just so tired of it, you know?
Yeah.
Coming to my mind is Harrison Ford always looks like he just does not want to be in any movie anymore, ever.
And you said yes?
I said, yes, eventually, yeah.
I think he makes that work for his character, though.
Yeah, it's kind of a happy accident for him, but it's also a happy haunting for him because now people just think that's him all the time and he's actually getting angry.
Yeah, and I think like much later, especially when these stars' fame continues to grow, like there's such a huge paycheck for these sequels, no matter how bad they are, they can't turn them down.
And let's just finish up talking about some Bill and Ted again. They have had 2 sequels that came out fairly close to each other. And I think a lot of the people are saying that the big thing I'm reading online is that this next film, they're doing the same plot as the first movie. They're going back in time to assemble, instead of, people for their history paper, they're assembling musicians from across different time periods to make the ultimate band. I think that is freaking hilarious. When they said that in the trailer, I started laughing so hard. The idea that you're going to have this band composed of just the most random, and again, we're going to learn some of things in this movie. I'm sure we're going to have little history lessons here or there. Like, that's the great things about these movies.
Be excellent to each other.
Yeah, no, I think it's super smart to go back to that formula because, that was the best. It's just the stupid history paper in the first one to make sure they don't fail. And they're bringing back, the greatest minds of all time.
And Abraham Lincoln. Party on, dudes!
So, yeah, I don't know. I have kind of middling hopes for this movie.
Yeah.
But, again, even if I'm such a fan of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey that I think it'll be great kind of no matter what, just because I want to see another film and I'm glad it's being made.
Yeah, and Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves still look the exact same. They're still just as funny and goofy to me.
When your wives suggested couples therapy, do you think that this is what they had in mind?
Definitely. I mean, we're a couple of couples, right?
And we can use this film as a litmus test for Matrix 4, because Keanu Reeves is also coming back from a long hiatus for that movie. Do you know if they're doing just a sequel to Matrix, or is it going to have Revolutions and what's the other one? Ultimatum? Fascination? Revolutions.
Everybody hates on Reloaded and Revolutions. I don't think they should wipe them away. I don't think they were that bad.
Yeah.
Just make another movie. Again, there's so much backstory. You can make another film. Is Neo gonna have a son? Definitely Neo and Trinity had a kid.
Mm-hmm. And much like a good sequel, it was good having you back on the podcast again, Connor. Where can people find your next sequel in 35 to 40 years?
Definitely on my Instagram, _ Connor Reeves.
Awesome.
You can find me there forever.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Let us know what your favorite sequel is that came too late or just in time. Mine's still gonna be Terminator 3, baby.